Welcome to Hart County Public Library Outreach Virtual Storytime. We are so glad that you could join us.
The Boxcar Children, The Woodshed Mystery, based on the book by Gertrude, Chandler, Warner. One morning, Grandfather had big news. Great Aunt Jane was moving. Benny did not understand. "Moving?" he said. "Moving is not big news. See?" Benny ran in a circle. Grandfather smiled. "This is a big move, Benny. My sister is coming to live in the house where we grew up. We're all going to go help." Henry, Jessie, Violet, and Benny Alden had not always lived with Grandfather. After their parents died, the children had run away. For a little while, they had lived in a boxcar in the woods. Then Grandfather found them. He gave them a real home. He even brought the boxcar. "This is the Bean Farm," said Grandfather. "As kids, Andy Bean was our best friend. Jane was very sad when he moved away. The Aldens were going to stay with Andy's brother. Aunt Jane's house was next door. It needed to be fixed up." "Do you grow beans?" Benny asked Mr. Bean. Benny liked to eat, and he loved beans. Mr. Bean shook his head. "We raise chickens." Benny frowned. "They give us lots of these," said Mr. Bean. Benny cheered up. He liked eggs almost as much as he liked beans. While the children ate breakfast, Grandfather and Mr. Bean made plans. "A lot has changed over the years," said Grandfather. "The house looks very old." Benny thought it looked scary. "Don't worry, Benny," said Jessie. "It won't look so strange once we fix it up, though it will take a lot of work." "Beep, beep, honk. We will have a lot of help," said Grandfather. "Grandfather," said Henry, "how did you find so many helpers?" Grandfather smiled. "Some things do not change. News still travels fast in this town." Day after day, the Aldens worked on the house. Little by little, the house did not seem so strange. Then one day, something strange did happen. "Eggs are missing from the coop." Mr. Bean scratched his head. Everyone looked at Benny. They all knew how much he liked to eat. "I would not take food," said Benny, "not even beans." If Benny had not taken the eggs, where had they gone? Soon Aunt Jane's house was ready. The children went exploring. They found a little building. It was just as old as the house. To Benny, it was just as scary. "Don't worry, Benny," said Henry. "It's only a woodshed." But it was more than that. Inside, there was a bed of hay, a stool, a table, a spoon, and a dish. On the dish were 3 eggs. Was there a person staying in the woodshed? The children ran to tell Grandfather what they had found. When they came back, they found something even stranger. The bed of hay was gone. There was no stool or table, no dish or spoon, and no eggs. "There's a mystery here," said Benny. The next day, Aunt Jane arrived. The children did not tell her about their mystery in the woodshed. They did not want to worry her. They did show her all of their hard work. "It's wonderful," said Aunt Jane. "Now I have something to show you." "This house is very old," Aunt Jane said. "It was built many, many years ago. At the time, our country was still fighting to be free. People hid here to stay safe." With that, Aunt Jane opened a secret door. "Did you hide here?" asked Benny. Aunt Jane laughed. "I'm not that old. Your grandfather, Andy Bean, and I used to play in this room," Aunt Jane sighed. "We had such great adventures." The children looked at each other. Did Aunt Jane miss Andy Bean? That night, the Aldens asked Mr. Bean about his brother. "Andy loved adventures," said Mr. Bean. "One day he went on an adventure and did not return." "Are you sad he did not say goodbye?" asked Violet. Mr. Bean shook his head. "I just hope he is okay." The next day, the children got back to their mystery. Where had everything in the woodshed gone? Violet had an idea. She knew the woodshed was just as old as the house. If there was a secret room in the house, maybe there was one in the woodshed. The secret room had many old treasures. It also had a bed of hay, a stool, a table, and an egg on a dish. Someone was living in the woodshed. After the children stopped by, the person had moved their things out of sight. Who was it? The Aldens were about to find out. "Andy Bean," said Jessie. The man nodded. Then he explained. He had come to see Aunt Jane. After all these years, he missed her. "How did you know she was moving here?" asked Jessie. Andy smiled. "News still travels fast in this town." "Why aren't you staying with your brother?" asked Henry. Andy sighed. "I was afraid he would be upset," said Andy. "I moved away so quickly all those years ago." "Mr. Bean isn't upset," said Violet. "And guess what?" said Benny. "We think Aunt Jane misses you too." Back at the house, they got their answer. Aunt Jane gave Andy Bean a big hug. So did Mr. Bean. Grandfather had been right all along. Many things had changed over the years. But there were still some things that stayed the same.